Welcome to Access Zen with Gregory Foster. Our program will help you set a more perfect balance between your inner world and the outside world. And now, here's your host, Gregory Foster.
And good morning. How is the week going for everybody? I know it's been a long week for some people, and it's been a great week for a lot of us. A lot of opportunities for personal depth and growth as certain events pop up in our life, and we get to practice. I get to practice a lot of the things we talk about on the show. So don't think for one second that I'm an expert or anything, but I'm glad to have you and glad that you're listening. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen, and we've got a really neat show for you today. So the title of our show, it's a relationship show. Remember, we worked on doing this during Valentine's Day, and so I'm just thrilled that we finally got a really great guest that's going to share with us some really wonderful relationship tips. So the theme of the show today is building a beautiful relationship, thriving in and out of the bedroom. How about that? So Janice Lindgren's going to be on in a little while, and she's going to share her deep insights into the law of attraction, and I know we all have heard that kind of terminology bounced around the last few years. And this really the secret to a successful, satisfying, and here's the key word, meaningful long-term relationship that thrives in and out of the bedroom. So we're talking real intimacy here. So I know we're all searching for, the magic pill that will somehow transform our relationships into the fairy tale that we like to see, in the movies. And it's possible within a certain, context to find the person of our dreams that represents that for us individually, maybe not the big screen, but for what that represents for us. So Janice will share how to make that a reality in a very practical way, how we must first do the work within ourselves to resolve our past and fulfill our present. So the buzzword is, for those of you out there, somebody gets me and someone has my back. That's kind of our theme for the show today. So we're going to get into that. So wanted to wrap up, as I like to do, the show that we talked about last week with Carl Mercer, and thanks for all your feedback. I did want to say that the mountain experience with Kyle, I want to tell a little more about that. So tuition is $1,500 per person. It's 3.5 days. And if you want to get more information, clearly you can go to thegardencompany.com to get information, or you can call this person, Cindy Goerig, and I'll spell her name, Goerig, and her direct telephone number, again, this is for the mountain experience via the Garden Company, is 208-263-4586. That's 208-263-4586 if you want to participate in the mountain experience that Kyle shared with us last week. So, clearly Kyle had some wonderful insights to share with us, really talking about overcoming the challenges and fears from our childhood, maybe as it relates to our experience with our parents and taking on that energy and then working through that energy, and how some folks, it takes them a long time to really clear that and get out of that phase and just get to who they really are. And then a lot of work we did with body memory, holding on to memories, and then how to release pain. And he just kind of took us on a beautiful flow. So I just encourage you, if you get a chance, to listen to that episode if you haven't done so already. So it was really, a wonderful show. So I wanted to, as has kind of become a tradition on the show, is to read a little bit from Craig Renwig's blog. So I thought I'd find something that was pretty appropriate for a relationship show. So let me just read this, and then we'll bring on Janice. So Craig says, he wrote this week. He says, "This past week, my wife and I celebrated the 10th anniversary of our first date. I thought 10 roses would be nice things, so I dropped by one of the local florists. Instead of the 10, the gentleman had a deal for 24, which he recommended, of course, and I accepted. But as I stood at the counter while he wrapped them, I thought, when you come to a shop like this, you know that you will get as many flowers as you want and afford without thinking if there will be enough. It's what we expect. When you go to a restaurant, there will always be food there. It's what we expect. The same applies to many things in our clickable, always enough Western culture. It's what we expect. We expect everything to be there all of the time without fail because it always seems to be. It's what we expect. it is interesting that even though we are all quite capable of being compassionate, giving love, helping each other, that it is not common that we do. I guess it's what we expect. So with that, I'd like to bring on Janice Lindgren. Janice, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Greg. I'm very well, thank you.
How's your morning?
Here in northern Idaho on a rainy morning.
Oh, nice.
It is nice. It's been very wet, which I just heard yesterday on the radio that we have lots of water in our rivers and lots of snowpack, so it's going to be a good year for moisture.
Oh, that's great. So, thanks for coming on the show today, and how's your morning? Everything going well?
It is. I've been very excited to be here. Talking about a subject that's very dear and very meaningful to me, and that's relationships.
Yes, and thank you for coming on. I really think sometimes I find myself getting caught up in, the events that happen, and I have just the most beautiful relationship, and my wife, Diggy, she's just absolutely, the most special person I've ever known in my life, and I'll share with you that one of my intentions that I visualized, while I was going to school at USM, because they have us do like these exercises to get to the heart of what real love is, below all the infatuation and my type and all that stuff. And it was really simple, and I saw in your profile that you'll dig this, is I have 3 kitty cats. I had 3 kitty cats. One just passed away last year. And they have been the most supportive, friendly, loyal creatures in my life than anyone else, up until recently, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. Now the friendships that I have are very meaningful with everyone in my life. I have an abundance of beautiful friendships. Take me forever to mention all those people that have been so great in my life. And my kitty cats have always been, very special to me. So I visualized, the number one quality is I would just like to have a woman in my life that makes me feel as good as they do, and vice versa. And I would absolutely say that my wife absolutely, consistently hits that mark every single day. Just beautiful love and support, and I just want to acknowledge her. So thank you.
Cats are, the metaphor of a cat and the relationship with a cat really is a good one for primary relationship, because the thing that is recognized about cats is they are fairly independent. And yet, not always, but yet they can be incredibly bonding pets, and it sounds like you experienced that. So they really represent that polarity that I think all of us experience. We have a really strong desire to be an individual, and yet we also have a very strong desire to connect. And I see, if I were just to look at relationship in a very big picture, I'd say it's the dance between those two polarities, between being an individual and expressing myself into the world and connecting with someone very deeply in a rich way. And thank you for that, because I'd never thought of that before. But I think it's one of the things I love about cats is that you have that opportunity for that dynamic.
Yeah, I don't want to just single out kitties. That was my experience. I know I have friends that have similar experiences with their dogs. I definitely want to make sure I love dogs too. But just for me, that was how I just had two cats that are very dog-like and loyal and just very loving. So yes, thank you. So Janice, I also would be remiss if I didn't ask you how your trip to El Salvador was. I know you were down there for about a week?
Dick and I were down there for a week with friends on the beach, and it was, I think it was relaxing, and it was just with good friends. I got to meet their 3 children. I'd heard about them so much, and spend that time with them. It was warm. We wore hardly any clothes. We lived outside most of the time, although we had nice sleeping rooms inside. But it was constant breeze off the ocean and swinging in hammocks. It was just exactly what I wanted, relaxing with good friends.
I'm visualizing that, swinging on the hammocks. I can't wait to take a little bit of time off myself. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It was tremendously fun.
So it wasn't all vacation, though. You had a purpose for going down there, too, correct?
Actually, my purpose was to spend time with these friends. That's really what it was. It was to be with them and to meet their children.
Beautiful.
And, yeah.
To bond.
To bond. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
And to spend that time with Dick also. Dick,
so we'll talk about your relationship with Dick, because it sounds like you have a wonderful connected relationship as well, and that's great.
We met, a friend introduced us actually, and that's about 12 years ago now. And the relationship very quickly developed into a very close relationship. We're both very strong people and very opinionated people, and it's been a journey with us because we really want the relationship. I mean, each of us individually clearly want a relationship, perhaps for different reasons. And I'll tell you my favorite reason for being in a relationship, the companionship, of course. And for me, I'm very much a developmental coach, and I have been introduced to several very helpful developmental models, and I find that using those models has helped me fashion a way for relationships to work better and better. And there's no better place to find out where you have an opportunity to develop than in a relationship, because that's where you get the most friction, the most rub, is in that day-to-day interaction. So I found that in this relationship with Dick, it just kept pushing me to my edge of where I next needed to expand and develop. And so that was really meaningful. And a lot of the work I do now with couples really has evolved out of, first of all, building on a strong foundation of the kinds of things that Kyle spoke of last week, the being able to be free from the past fears, pains, ideas, imprints, being able to have that under your belt and then be able to be free too. And the free too is what was so meaningful to me as I engaged with Dick in our relationship. Free to explore more. Free to develop the kind of relationship we wanted that's rich and deep. And it's not without friction, but allowing that friction to help me evolve, not having that friction come up and thinking I needed to change him, and vice versa. So Dick and I have spent long days and hours in exploring the friction between us and how to resolve it. And some of the tools I use are things that he and I developed just to work our relationship into something that's more beautiful and deeper.
That's wonderful. Janice, we're going to take a break in about a minute here, but I would, of course, be remiss in not sharing with the listeners your background. And you have a very diverse background. You have a Bachelor of Science in, of all things, dental hygiene and a doctorate in chiropractic. And you have, like Kyle, you did maybe you can share with us the work you did at the Guardian Company before now launching off on your own private practice.
Yes, you're asking me about that.
Share with us a little bit about your background, and because it sounds like, once again, someone with a lot of life experience and wisdom to share.
So you can see I've always been in healthcare, which means I've been interested in people and in health. And I went into chiropractic because I was interested in going into that more deeply. And I wanted to do it in a way that didn't address symptoms. And philosophically, that spoke to me. The longer I was in chiropractic, I still had this sense that a lot of people were locked up physically because of the emotional stress and tension they carried. Kyle spoke to that yesterday. Last week he spoke to that, where we store. If we can't address something when it comes up, if it's emotionally charged and we're not capable of addressing it, then we stuff it and put it into our body. the more I began to see that when I met the garden company, and at that time Kyle's father was still teaching in it, I went for myself, and then I realized that the work that was being done there was very fundamental to health. And again, just because I'm always seeking the most fundamental way of addressing something, after about a year and a half or two, I just said I'm ready to step out of chiropractic and I want to do this work. And so I think I've been doing this close to 20 years now. And working as a
that's
teacher
beautiful.
and coach.
That's a very diverse background. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go on a short break here. I want to pick up, thank you for sharing that with us, with the listeners, to see the wonderful background you have. And clearly you are in a relationship. And I know I see some relationship coaches, and it doesn't seem like they have a lot of personal relationship experience, but they have a lot of advice to give, and I see you really balanced. You have both, so thank you. I'm Gregory Foster. We're listening to Access Zen, and we'll be back in just a moment.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
And good morning. Thank you for being with us. We've got the lovely Janice Lindgren, relationship coach. So, Janice, we kind of left off. You were giving us your background with the garden company and your diverse background in healthcare, and then you were also sharing with the listeners your relationship with your husband, Dick, of 10 years, and you were kind of using that as an example to talk about how you worked your process and how companionship was really important to you. Is that right?
Yes.
That's beautiful. So, I get asked all the time by listeners and by friends and people I run into. They'll say to me, Greg, what is this law of attraction? You remember that little thing that came in a few years ago, so it's kind of become a buzzword now. What is the law of attraction? What's the difference between that and infatuation?
Okay. I'll talk about infatuation. Infatuation is fantastic. It's something that it's a combination of hormonal, it's a combination of, it feels so good when someone is interested in me and pays attention to me, and it's a little bit blind. It feels really good. Everybody's on their best behavior, and it's just a really exciting place to be. It is, if we stayed in that for an entire relationship, nobody does, but if we did, we'd burn out because it's a very high energy kind of place. But it does bring people together. It's biological, among other things, but it's also about recognizing that we have needs that we are seeking to have fulfilled, and one of those needs is just to connect and to have somebody special in my life, somebody that feels I'm special. So infatuation is one of the things that brings people together. It's a very nice energy. It usually moves into a different phase, and I think I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the phases of a relationship. We come into relationship for reasons. We don't maybe consciously feel this, but we do want to connect. We do want to have that special person, but we also want to have family. We come into relationships for family, for companionship. A family or two people, a couple, can usually accomplish more economically than a person can alone. There's shared responsibilities. It's in a way, to kind of put it very matter-of-factly, more efficient. So there are all these things that create coming into a relationship. And the law of attraction, I'm not, it's not a term that I use, Greg. Can you give me I'm aware of the term, but give me a quick thumbnail of what
sure. Yeah, so there's different ways that this terminology is represented. So it's really kind of coming from a deeper level of, like you're talking about the infatuation and sexual attraction, and that's always a huge part of it. So the concept here, when it comes to relationships, because there's different forms of law of attraction, is coming from a deeper level, kind of like the word I like to use sometimes is how outer reality, reflection, or experience. So where we are inside with ourselves, combined with our whatever attracts us, kind of pulls us into a certain person initially, right?
Got it. Okay. Yes, I understand. That helped me.
Sorry about that.
Well, I just wanted to be sure. In fact, in relationships, that's one of the things that when I'm working with a couple is so important, is to be clear that I'm thinking the same thing he's thinking when he says.
Yeah, that's kind of it, yeah.
And so I didn't want to continue on with that until I was clear what was meant. So it's what I have in me that I'm projecting outward is what I draw.
Yes. Yes.
Is that the way to say it? Yes, and that, it's such a powerful thing. And I'm going to draw what I think about and what I put energy into, essentially. Where my consciousness is what I will tend to draw. We have all kinds of colloquial expressions that point that out, like be careful what you wish for. What is sometimes not recognized by us individually is it works whether we're wishing for something or whether we're afraid of something. And fear is also an energy, a part of that law of attraction. And so it comes back to, like you were describing when you were at USM, you did things that created what you were looking for. It's meaningful to know why we want to be in a relationship, because that's exactly what we're going to end up with. If we're afraid or we're trying to avoid certain things, unfortunately, my experience, we draw those in also.
Yeah, and I'd like to just pause there because that really resonates for me. Because a lot of the deep work I did, not just at USM, but different modalities that I worked with, was all about clearing, like a lot of the stuff that Kyle talked about last week really resonated. Fears we pick up from our childhood they're almost subconscious. We're not really even aware of them, but as you say, they kind of tend to draw us. And I will tell you that many of the relationships that I had, really from high school all the way through my first marriage and even well past that into my dating life, seemed to draw in the fear part of it. And I wasn't even really consciously aware of it, but I was drawing in, women that I was really highly physically attracted to and had, a certain level of, intellectual attraction as well. But there was always something that made me feel insecure with them. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, so if I am a young person and I'm interested in a relationship, of course someone's going to catch my eye through the infatuation stage. But it's also good for me when I say young person, I'm thinking young adult through 40s, through 40s and 50s.
And young at heart.
And young at heart. It's really important to have some kind of an idea of what's important in a relationship. The infatuation, that chemistry, getting my needs met is an important draw initially, but what's really important is I know if I have some really good values, companionship values, cooperation values, building together, teamwork kind of values. Those are the things that are going to sustain a relationship through time and allow couples to go through difficult times. There will be difficult times. It's a crucible. Marriage is a crucible, and it puts us to the test, and it lets us refine ourselves to grow and develop.
Right, and so working this process. So how would a young woman or a young man or a middle-aged man or middle-aged woman who have noticed maybe in their relationships a certain pattern that they're deeply attracted at first, and then they're saying, oh, here we go again, it's the same old stuff, and they're kind of looking outside of themselves. Why is she doing this? Why is this happening again? I'm sure you've heard that many times, right?
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's time then to do our individual work. When we start noticing that's step one, then it's time to do our individual work. It's helpful to have a sounding board, a coach or someone or some system to go to check against. But the question that's really helpful to ask myself when I start seeing a pattern is this. sort of starting with the premise that that pattern is doing something for me. I'm getting some benefit from it. It may not, in the big picture, it may not be a benefit, but in that pattern, whatever I'm doing is giving me some perceived benefit, and it's helpful to find out what that is. Let me think of an example. Jealousy. I was working with a group of young 21, 22-year-old juniors and seniors in a university. And one of the questions that came up in dialogue with one of them was, I keep being attracted to jealous men, and yet I'm the kind of person that likes to, I'm very social when I go to a party, and then my boyfriend can't handle it, and, what to do with that. So the first thing I asked her was, what do you get out of being with someone that has a jealous streak in them? What is it that, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? Because initially that's exciting. And initially it gives a sense of I'm special and I'm important and this guy really likes me, but it's wearing. It wears thin pretty fast, and that was what was starting to happen with her. She didn't like it, that she couldn't go to a party and spend some time talking with different people. So that's an example where stepping back and saying, okay, I'm attracted to jealous men. That's the pattern. What is that pattern doing for me? Oh, that pattern is making me feel better, making me feel special. And that's about looking outside to get that identity need met. And that doesn't work. And that's in the development of a relationship over time, one of the hugest helpful individual growth steps is to recognize when I'm looking outside to get my needs met. That puts a terrific burden on my partner to be all things and make me feel better, and even if I have a bad day, they're going to make me feel better. It's not that it isn't wonderful to come home and have someone hold you and say, I understand, and here, let me rub your feet or something, or just cuddle. I don't mean it. I'm not talking about that's not meaningful. I'm talking about not looking at my partner to make me feel special, better, worthy, the source of my self-esteem.
To define ourselves, to not let your partner define who you are. You have to be who you are already.
Yes. And that's a
Beautiful.
process. That's a process.
And that's what you do, right? That you work with someone, anyone, from young and old, who are looking to develop themselves to have a successful relationship. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Individual development occurs powerfully within a relationship, and that's how I sort of kept emerging towards working with couples. I found that it was just exciting to have that material right in front of the three of us, the stuff that was happening in the relationship, to support them each individually growing and developing, which I just feel is one of the things that we're here to do, is to arrive here and to develop.
So true. No, I don't want you to lose your train of thought there. When someone says something that's fairly profound, I like to come back to it, because if it resonates with me, it most likely resonates with someone listening. So you talked about, the person who's in a relationship with someone who's always jealous, and they're like constantly seeing that pattern reemerge. And I will tell you that what I noticed is, from my past, I would typically pick the opposite. I would tend to pick women who made me feel really insecure in social situations, and I was definitely never the jealous type, so I wouldn't do anything with that energy. And I was never with someone who made me feel comfortable until just recently. And I will tell you the difference between being with someone who makes you feel secure, because I'm secure. That's the reason why I found someone who makes me feel secure, is because I found security within. Is that right?
That's right. Another pattern, since you're talking about common patterns, another common pattern is to be attracted to someone who is not going to be available in an intimate way.
That rings true too.
Very classic pattern. And that's all because I am not, probably in growing up, there wasn't that kind of connection, intimacy in my family, and so I'm not comfortable around it. Intimacy requires vulnerability, and that's a tough one. We don't want to expose ourselves. It requires me being two parts to intimacy. Intimacy is someone really gets me, and I get somebody else, and I accept them, and they accept me. And so intimacy has two demands. One is that I be safe for you, S-A-F-E, safe for you. And the other demand is that I allow you to see me. And that's the vulnerability. And the first one is really easier. Being safe for you is easier than also allowing you to really see me. Especially if I'm self-critical. Especially if I'm self-critical myself, then I'm really not going to want you to see me because I'll have a sense that, probably not consciously, but unconsciously, if you really saw me, you wouldn't like me.
And these are all the things that kind of go on in self-talk underneath the surface inside ourselves, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I will share with you that as I got wiser in my life and I started to recognize these patterns, I would find myself, attracted to a certain young lady, and yet I would constantly find some kind of rub where the intimacy just wasn't there, or I just didn't feel like she loved me the way that I wanted to be loved. And it wasn't until I really went to USM and started doing some deeper work that I suddenly realized, oh my goodness, that's really what's going on inside of myself, and I didn't even realize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a profound realization, because I know we walk around with these patterns and these things that continue to keep happening, and it could be in our work life, but a lot of times it's in our relationships. And oftentimes we'll notice, I've found that the pattern repeats until we look at that thing inside ourselves. And then suddenly, when we clear it inside ourselves, and I can tell you firsthand, it's cleared, folks. Once you clear it inside, it really goes away outside. And suddenly, that's the law of attraction. Suddenly, you're drawing in the good experience instead of the other one, right?
And that is so profound. As each of us experience that happening, it's so profound. I think most people have experienced this, where there's something I need to clear out. Maybe I have some particular kind of thing that just keeps irking me, and I really get to the bottom of it, and I clear it, and all of a sudden, there aren't any people like that around me anymore, and the same people are there. It's just that they're not mirroring that thing that I hadn't yet sorted out in myself.
Yes.
Our relationship is such a great mirror for us.
We just have to take the time, and like we talk about on the show, there's so much stuff going on with work and school and driving and traffic that we get really caught up in all the isms and all the things that are impermanent in our lives, and really it's the relationships in our lives that are really driving the learning, the deeper experiences. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where we want to go.
There are a couple things that I'd like to talk about, Greg, and I don't know where it's best to put them. I do want to talk a little bit about the phases of a relationship. I think that would be helpful. And then also a little tool to use.
I wanted to say, yes, thank you. And I did want to say that we're going to be taking a break here in about a minute. And I wanted to lead you into, and maybe you could share with us more deeper when we come back. Definitely want to talk about the phases of relationship. But the one thing I've heard you say a few times, and I wanted to kind of share with the listeners, you'll kind of like ask the question, why do I want to be in a relationship? Mm-hmm. And versus what most of us would say is, well, why do I want to be in this relationship? So can you share that difference, and then we'll take a break and come back and talk about the phases of a relationship?
Yes, let's just look at each of those and see how they feel. Why do I want to be in a relationship? That's really about me, looking at what I want in a relationship. Why do I want to be in this relationship is I'm looking at the other person now. I'm looking at them and their qualities. It's not a bad question, but I'd always ask the first one first. Why do I want to be in a relationship? And that helps me then know what I'm seeking. And that's the law of attraction. If I declare it, then I'm on my way. I want to be in a relationship for companionship, for intimacy, then I'm going to find that. I want to be in a relationship with someone who's also interested in a great relationship. Then I don't even have to ask why do I want to be in this relationship. I'll be clear about what I'm looking for, and if some relationship is begun and it doesn't seem to offer that, I'll find myself drifting out of it.
Beautiful. I'm Gregory Foster, and you're listening to Access Zen.
And now, let's return to Access Zen.
And we're back. I'm Gregory Foster, and we're talking with Janice Lindgren. Janice, you were kind of talking to us at the end of the break, why do I want to be in a relationship? Well, I also want to get to, the phases of relationship, and this is a kind of a key one. Why deep compatibility and cooperation is so sexy.
Great. Let me talk about the phases first. It's helpful to have a little bit of context for operating in a relationship. There may be more, but I see relationships in three phases. The initial one is the infatuation, which we've spoken about. That usually lasts less than a year. Maybe, I don't see many examples of it lasting that long even. But after that, there's a great big middle phase, and some people may never even complete this one, and so don't get to the third one. But the great middle phase I call the power struggle, and I'll come back to that. And then the last phase is collaboration, cooperation. These all correlate with developmental models, and the infatuation phase is very much where I'm getting my needs met from outside of me. And then we move into the power struggle phase. This one is when we're in competition I'm in competition for my agenda. So it doesn't feel like competition, but it literally is. If we step back and look at what is it I'm trying, if we're in an argument, for example, say we're in an argument about how to do some household chore, what are we competing for? We're competing for our agenda, our way of doing it. Righteousness comes in here. Unfairness comes in here. It's all about it. The way I see it is the way that's accurate, is the right way. And what happens in that power struggle phase is we start creating stronger boundaries between us. There's a me and there's a you. And your listeners can just stop and reflect a minute about times when they've been in conflict with a partner. It feels very much like there's a me here and there's a you over there, and the we of the relationship is lost. And as soon as we put those boundaries between us, that boundary of me and that it's true, it's a true boundary. There's a me, I'm not you, you're not me, there's an I and a you. But boundaries are where battles start. It's where all the battles always start, whether it's an individual. And in that power struggle, we start making our partner, we start feeling and acting like our partner is the enemy. And there's no way to win. There's no way for a relationship to win when my partner is the enemy. So when I talk about knowing why I'm in a relationship, when we get into the power struggle phase, it's really helpful to have that to have some grounding in why I'm in this, because it feels like I want to get out of it. When we're in the middle of those heated times, it feels like I just want out of here. This was a big mistake. I just want out. And so it's very helpful to be anchored in knowing why I'm in here, because at this point it's going to turn into a little bit of work.
So you gave me an example last week when we talked about how you are able to take instead of jumping into the argument and getting into what I call the I'm upset because you did this, so I'm upset at you for this reason, right? Fill in the blank, and get into the heated argument, and then it escalates and escalates until it's something really kind of sad, right? In a lot of cases.
Yeah.
You've found some skills of how to kind of take a break and get to that loving. Can you share that with our listeners?
Yes. When Dick and I were at this phase, we created this expression, and of extreme goodwill. And so when I work with extreme goodwill, and I put the word extreme on the phrase goodwill because it's in those moments in a relationship when we're really kind of battling it out toe to toe, that that it's more difficult to get to goodwill. I can have so many righteous reasons not to feel goodwill. So if we think about the term goodwill, and when I work with couples, I usually ask them, let's talk about goodwill. What's it mean to you? And so some of the phrases that come up, and again, the listeners can reflect for themselves, but first of all, goodwill, I feel it's a sense of I have your best interests at heart. Not that I don't have mine at heart also, but I have your best interests at heart. I have the best interests of this relationship at heart as well as my own. I want to be safe. I want to be generous. I'd like to be accepting. I'd like to drop the criticism, the judgment. Those are some of the aspects of goodwill. Extreme goodwill is I'm able to do it when I'm in the heat of what feels like a battle.
Mm-hmm. Go into deep love and compassion.
Yes. Yeah, feeling the love is really hard when we're in the middle of heated discussion of some kind, especially if I'm feeling challenged or if my identity is tied up in it. A classic phrase when my identity is tied up in it is the feeling of, if you really love me, you wouldn't be doing this. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think everyone has experienced that in themselves.
Yes.
Why are you doing this? You don't love me. And that's, my identity is tied up in there. I'm feeling unworthy, or I'm feeling not esteemed in some way. So I want to keep going just a little bit, because there's something about this goodwill that is so fascinating.
Yes.
So I'll just tell you an example of when this struck me. This was long ago, and Dick and I were in one of our heated discussions, and I realized that I couldn't reach, we were sitting together talking, and I couldn't reach goodwill. I could feel it. I didn't want to. I literally got up and walked around the corner so I couldn't visually see him, because that was making me angry. Seeing the look on his face and his body language was keeping me in that broiled anger. So I walked around the corner, sat down on the floor, and I said, extreme goodwill, extreme goodwill. Where is it? I got to find it. It's in me somewhere. And another little voice said, I don't want to. I don't want to have goodwill.
I want to stay mad.
And he's being unreasonable. And
it's his fault.
I just stayed with it. And I finally reached, and I felt it somewhere in my chest, and I finally reached. It was really a release, a relax, a letting go. And when I felt it, I just felt my whole body relax. And only then could I go back and re-engage with Dick in the conversation so that we could sort it out. So that's when I realized extreme goodwill isn't even primarily for my partner, it's for me. It's for me to get out of that hot, angry place that almost feels like it's controlling me. And I don't think I'm unusual in that way, and I think that we all have been in those places where it just seems like the anger's taking over, or the righteousness is taking over, and it feels so justified.
That is so pertinent. I just want to acknowledge you for that. That is so beautiful that you were able to take a break in the heat of the moment. And so here's a tip. And go against your normal desire to want to be right and jump back in and say something. Take a step away and follow, Janice's advice. Go within, find that place of extreme goodwill and compassion and love, and you'll feel it when it comes over you, and it will help you gain the perspective of, why am I in this relationship? And I am in this relationship. I'm invested, in my heart with this person, and I want to make it work. So, like you say, now it just changes your perspective to coming back to bringing everything back into balance, right?
It does. Can I say one more thing about that?
Sure, yeah.
It's a skill.
It is a skill. You have to practice it, right?
And skill takes practice over time. I recommend, because this is what I do and what I recommend with my clients, practice it when it's easy. Notice the extreme goodwill when you're feeling loving, so you can get the feel of the taste of what that is. So when you're having lovely moments with your partner, feel the extreme goodwill that just naturally flows out of you, so that you know the taste and the feel of that, so that you know what you're going for when you're sitting on the floor and trying to get to it.
And this applies also, for example, if you have, if you're in a very intense work environment and you're working with folks that have a different style of communication, and then something from the outside of you, like, an account situation or a customer service situation breaks down, and that's where people of different styles tend to kind of disconnect a little bit sometimes, right, and get into the, well, I'm right, you're wrong kind of situation. These kind of skills can also help us in our work relationships, correct?
Oh my gosh, Greg, I'm so glad you pointed that out. Absolutely. Yeah. Having this be a way of life in the way I relate to all people. Wouldn't the world be a different place if we were all relating to one another this way?
Yeah, I have, I'm really kind of talking about myself because I'm, very competitive and want to be successful, and I apply Zen everywhere I can. And I have found that staying in my heart, even in heated discussions, people can feel that. And instead of the whatever the intense situation is, because we don't always have to agree with each other. It's not about being right or wrong. We can give each other space. Don't have to override that. It's just coming from a place of, do you hear me? Do you see what I'm saying? And when we feel heard, everything is okay again.
Yeah. It's a development. It's a level of cognitive development of consciousness, to be able to hold multiple perspectives and to move beyond the kind of the modern phase, modern, postmodern. The modern phase is very much right, wrong, kind of polarity, right, wrong, good, bad, and to be able to move past that and hold multiple perspectives, as you beautifully said. I can see their position, I can see my position without judging either one is more right or more wrong. They're different. And that's one of the things I work with couples. It's one of the most important things. There are several important things I do with couples, but that's one of them, is to be able to learn to see my partner's position from inside them. They have their own particular way of seeing something, and it isn't going to be exactly like mine. If I keep trying to understand them from the way I see the world, I'm going to miss the mark. And we get off in communication, which is another whole topic. Maybe another time we'll talk about communication. But
wonderful.
I wanted to underline what you said, the ability to see from inside that person how they're seeing it, because it's valid. I may not agree, but it's valid.
I hear you, and I hear what you're saying. And we are just about out of time, Janice. I wanted to wrap it up with, you kind of close with, somebody gets me and has my back. You want to just real briefly touch on that, and then how do the listeners reach you if they want to engage you for a speaking engagement or hire you as a coach?
Great. Someone has my back. That seems to be a very common expression right now, but it really it means that someone really does care about me. Someone wants to support me. And there's something, I think it's one of the sexiest things there can be, is to have a partner who I feel they've got my back, and the other thing, that they really see me. I mean, each of us yearns to be seen, to be understood, deeply understood and cared for. And infatuation is more of a chemistry kind of sexual attraction, but it wears. It wears, and it doesn't last. I don't mean chemistry isn't important, but that's not enough to sustain a long-term relationship. And it's the deep mutual understanding and feeling like someone really cares about me and has my back that generates the kind of intimacy that is sustainable and deep, and it's sexy.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful show. I'm Gregory Foster. You're listening to Access Zen. Make it a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you again for being a part of Access Zen.